I quit my job at Stragview Reception Center today. I've been a correctional officer for about a year now, and I find the job exciting and rewarding at times. I had been discharged from the military about 2 years ago for medical reasons, and as the bills piled up and my funds shrank into the double digits, I knew I had to find some work. The state was paying COs good money with excellent benefits, and they generally hire military guys over civilians. I put in an app and started my new and exciting life as a correctional officer within a month. After a few years of yelling at grown men, searching cells, and a mountain of bullshit, I got myself into a little bit of trouble. I'd gotten a bit of a reputation for laying hands on unruly inmates, so when the major called me into his office, I kind of expected it. I had been assured by my fellow officers that I'd get a slap on the wrist, maybe a day or two of administrative leave, and be back to work within a week. What I hadn't expected was 3 months on post as I assessed my attitude and the way I interact with others. For those who don't know, post is about the most boring assignment in all of corrections. You spend your nights in a vehicle, driving around the perimeter, trying not to fall asleep and crash your car into a ditch. It's tedious and unfulfilling work, given to older officers, incompetent officers, or officers in need of a good slap on the nose. I was understandably upset about this development, but as there was nothing I could do about it, I swallowed my pride and prepared for my 3-month stay in purgatory. Had I known what would happen to me out there, I'd have turned in my badge on the spot. I was met at the gate by Sergeant Mathis on what was my first night on post. I'd seen Mathis a few times since I'd started, but I don't think I'd ever spoken to him. Mathis is old even by DOC standards, and he's been riding post for the last 10 years of his career. To hear some of the other officers tell it, he used to be some badass on the compound, but he was sent to post after getting injured and just never came off it. He rides post every night, continuously roving up and down the 2-mile track, never missing a night. He looked about as thrilled to see me as I was to be here. Post may not seem as difficult as working on the compound, but you're the prison's first line of defense in many ways. They've put you on Route 2 tonight, the back line, so just be sure you're ready for 12 hours before you head out. He let his hand slide along the bed of the battered old Ford Ranger, like a rider stroking an old and willing steed. So, what do I do on post exactly? I know I patrol every 15 to 30 minutes, but other than constant patrol, he said, rounding in sudden anger. He got very close to my face before I realized it, and his eyes were huge and staring. I took a few steps back from him, and the side mirror slapped into my back, making me jump. His face was wooden, ghoulish in its intensity, and he seemed on the verge of punching me. He seemed to realize what he was doing, and took a step back. You want to patrol constantly. If you're always moving, then nothing can sneak up on you. Also, make sure you leave your cell phone in the car. I know some of you younger officers think no one will notice if you bring your phone to post, but trust me when I say you don't want any lights out there. No dome light, no headlights. Just use the light poles to navigate, and you'll be okay. I raised an eyebrow at him. Okay from what? He didn't say anything, just ran a hand along the truck near a big dent in the back fender. Okay from what? I asked again, and he seemed to notice me this time as he came back to reality. I had a conversation with a young officer like you once. 3 years ago, he came out to post for a few weeks and didn't think he had to listen to my warnings either. They found his truck out by post 2, out by the sheds, door wide open. Come the morning after, they couldn't raise him on the radio. He wasn't in it. He was nowhere. There was no sign at all. He didn't show up to work the next day. He didn't show up to work any day after that either. He was never seen again. Dude probably got bored and left, I said under my breath. Mathis looked at me sourly. Don't get complacent out there, boy. This isn't the sort of place that forgives complacency. There are things out there that are better kept out of the prison. What things those were, he refused to elaborate on. He just stumped off towards the front and away from me and the idling truck. The first hour and a half was very dull. I watched from the front seat of the Ranger as they fed evening meal, watching the inmates scamper back to their dorm as the daylight began to wane and the night began to creep up. As sundown came, the radio announced restricted movement and concluded any unsupervised strolls across the compound. It was 8 o'clock, only 2 hours into my shift, and I pulled up next to the Post 2 shed and killed the engine. I put my feet up on the dash and pulled out my phone, not caring what some old fart had to say, as I surfed Reddit and checked Facebook. It was a boring post, but I had to admit, it had its perks. As I sat, the sun waning and eventually dying around me, I started to catch something out of the corner of my eye. The compound sat perched on an incline surrounded by thick woods. The woods were a good 50 feet away from the fences, but close enough to make them look menacing, this close to dark. Something kept bounding in and out of them, just off to the left of my line of sight. Once or twice, I thought I caught a glimpse of a dog or something in the side mirror. I shrugged it off and got back to my phone. By the time it was good and dark, it was time for me to make another pass around the perimeter. As I cranked the old truck, it sputtered and died on me. I cursed, twisted the key, and gave it some gas this time to make it sputter to life. They always gave corrections the worst vehicles. I was driving around the little dirt path, trying to keep it on the road, when something big ran in front of the truck. I slammed on my brakes, but it was already gone. It had been on the fence side of the road, running for the woods. I'd only gotten a quick look at it as it loped past. It looked like a big dog, and as I looked towards the woods, I couldn't see anything but the nearly invisible tree line. I was still feeling startled as I pulled back towards the sheds. What the hell was that thing? I had heard that some of the dogs in the area had formed a little dog pack, but this thing had been bigger than the usual mutts you saw in the area. I parked and turned off the engine again, pulling out my phone to clear my head. 10 minutes of social media later, and I had calmed down a little. I hadn't forgotten about the big dog thing, but I decided that I'd blown it out of proportion. It was just a dog, nothing to worry about. When I looked back at the clock, I realized it was already 10 o'clock. I cranked the truck again and was just about to pull out of the road again when something hit the side of my vehicle. I had reached for my monster in the cup holder just before the hit, and I cursed as the drink spilled all over my shirt. I shook the sticky liquid off as I looked behind me, thinking I had clipped the shed somehow. What I saw was a new dent in the back of the truck, and no sight of whatever I had hit. If the dent hadn't been there, I would have thought I had imagined the whole thing. I got out and looked around, but there was nothing to see. Just a dent in the fender, and the oppressive darkness around the shed. After doing my circuit again, I pulled back up to the shed in a pretty foul mood. I felt sticky and miserable. I was covered in energy drink, my ass was starting to fall asleep, I needed to pee like a racehorse. I looked around for a bathroom, but there were no bathrooms to be seen. I wondered where the other drivers went when they needed to go. Probably carried a bottle or something. I looked around fretfully and finally decided to just go behind the shed. It was hidden pretty well, and I doubted anybody would see me. I stepped out of the truck, leaving the door open and the engine running, as I walked behind the shed to do my business. I had barely started when I heard something slam into the side of the truck. A stream of hot piss joined the energy drink on my shirt as I jumped about a mile. I turned to see what had hit the car, just as a second loud crash shattered the passenger side window. I got myself zipped up and rounded the shed, expecting a large dog or a bird. What I found was much worse. Between me and the door, its massive shoulder resting against the dent, was something that was part mountain lion and part nightmare hound. Its skin was midnight black, chitinous plates that creaked when it moved, with a long snout full of sharp teeth that dribbled over its jaws. Its eyes were non-existent, and its feet were home to long, sharp claws that had sliced a line in the side of the Ranger. It turned that eyeless head on me and opened its mouth to loose a loud, angry sound that immediately sent me running. My boots clapped against the dirt road as I ran for my life. As I ran, my mind raced, trying to form a plan that didn't involve trying to out-sprint this thing for a half a mile. I could double back to the car. It wasn't that far away, and there was a radio and a shotgun in there that I could use to call for help and defend myself. No matter how big this thing was, a load of buckshot to the face was likely to leave it in a bad way. Yeah, it probably hadn't left the shed yet. I was sure I could turn around and make it back before I heard it snarl right behind me then, and I didn't have to look to know it was less than a foot away. I sprinted, running flat out, and if I'd fallen, I'd have been dead. I hadn't run far when my back exploded in agony. I wanted to stop, wanted to see how bad it had clawed me, but I knew I had to run. I ran, the spotlights offering me islands of light in the glowing darkness. and as I ran flat out, I heard its heavy footsteps behind me veering out of the light. It didn't seem to like being in the light, and I used this to my advantage, putting on a burst of speed every time I left one of the islands of safety. I could see the curve that would take me around the fence and back into the prison's front area. There would be people there, guards in the control room, doors to hide behind, people that would shoot this thing and let me live another day. That was when I tripped. I fell hard on the dirt, rolling as I fell and covering my head with my arms as I came to a stop. I just knew that it would be on me now, tearing me apart, and I quivered as the seconds ticked by with no ripping pain. Something fell across me then, some bright flash that blinded me, even beyond my closed eyelids. I sat as still as I could in the sand as this new something stopped inches from my head. Then it quieted all at once, and I heard someone ask me what the hell I thought I was doing. I opened my eyes and found the Post 1 vehicle sitting right in front of me, its lights bathing me where I sat. I didn't answer her. I just got up and ran. I ran to my truck, pushed the keys into the ignition, and thundered out of the parking lot like a bat out of hell. My phone rang about 10 minutes later, but I didn't answer it. It's been ringing all night, and I still haven't answered it. I know it's the prison, but I don't care. I'm never going back there again. I'm sitting in the bathtub, my back wound making the water red as I soak up the heat. The cuts on my back are deep, but I don't know where to go to get them cleaned or tended to. I don't know if I ever want to leave my house again. What I saw tonight, I stumbled across something I can't explain. I'm not going back to work, but if you take my place, be sure to listen to that old man when he tells you to continuously rove. If you have to go to post, make sure you follow the rules. Don't stop. Don't bring anything out there that might draw its attention. And don't get out of your car for any reason. Otherwise, they might find your car out at post one morning, after whatever lives in the woods finds you first. Good evening, everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague. Thank you so much for joining me for tonight's story. I hope you enjoyed another trip to Stragview. I can assure you there will be plenty more to come. Stragview is one of my favorite settings for stories, having been a correctional officer for, almost 5 years now. There's just something creepy and a little bit magical about a prison. It's unlike anywhere else on Earth. Thank God for that. Well, before we go, let's thank our sponsors. Thanks to Leslie Lou Riddle for being our Spooky Skeleton tier contributor. Thanks, Leslie. We just couldn't do it without you. If you too would like to support the show, come on down to Patreon. For just $5 a month, we have our Spooky Skeleton tier where you can have your name read out at the end of every TikTok and every YouTube video that I make. I'm thinking about adding something to that too, where $5 subscribers get to suggest a story for my Monday readings. So if that's something that interests you, come on down. That may be where I start pulling my Monday stories from. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.